You might be starting to think I'm a little obsessed on the subject of cold air intakes. Let's face it, I've already made several videos on the topic. But it's not that I'm obsessed about cold air intakes. It's that I'm confused about the negative attitude towards them. One of the things that really grinds my gears is when people make a statement about a subject, as if it's a fact, but don't back it up with any supporting evidence. I hear and read this a lot in discussions about cold air intakes. I'll often see comments like, "There is ample proof to indicate that cold air intakes don't work." I mean, really? Where did you hear or read this so-called proof? When I was researching for my previous video on cold air intakes, it was very difficult to find any evidence to suggest that they didn't work. In reality, most of this negative feedback was on E46 forums, with E46 owners simply stating that they installed a cold air intake and it didn't work. I also found lots of people making reference to the guys from Mighty Car Mods who did a video on cold air intakes and found that they didn't work. And yes, I have watched that video and I did enjoy it. I do question the parameters of their experiment, and I'll explain more on that later in the video. So for this video, I've done more research, I've done more digging, because I'm determined to get to the bottom of this topic. I want to find out once and for all if cold air intakes work. Now, I'm going to give you some real evidence to indicate that cold air intakes don't work, but I'll also give you some evidence to indicate that cold air intakes do actually work. What's really confused me is the amount of distrust for this mod. Despite the largely positive information about the effectiveness of cold air intakes, 3/4 of you aren't convinced. From reading your comments and feedback on other forums, I think I've finally worked out the reason for it. Firstly, there's a group of people who simply don't believe in any mods whatsoever for their E46. They believe the E46 is a well-designed car and can't see the value in tampering with something that already works. So the next group of people are those who love doing mods on their E46. They will explore every single avenue to squeeze that last little drop of horsepower out of their E46. And once again, I'm okay with this. We're all entitled to our own opinions. But finally, there's the undecided group. Those guys who are hedging their bets. They've read all the positive information about cold air intakes, and they've also read all the negative information. But like me, they see all the negative statements about cold air intakes, with its loud voice but no real evidence to back up what's being said. So for this group of people, I hope the information in this video is going to be of some help to you. And for the rest of you, well, it'll probably just reaffirm the position that you already hold. Here's the bottom line, folks. You cannot buy a cold air intake for your BMW E46 3 Series. They don't exist. The kits that you see from AFE Power, K&N and Mishimoto are not cold air intakes, they're performance intakes. By its very definition, a cold air intake must draw colder air into the engine through the throttle body, because the aftermarket intakes for the E46 all utilise the existing mounting location as the BMW airbox and draw air from the same locations. They are not capable of drawing more colder air into the engine. However, that being said, by virtue of the pod filter, they are capable of drawing a larger volume of air into your engine. And it's this reason alone which produces a moderate horsepower improvement. You can get a few extra horsepower by having a retune done after you've installed your intake. This will allow the engine to take better advantage of that increased airflow. It's not 100% necessary, but when you're chasing every last drop of horsepower for your E46, then it's certainly worthwhile doing. A couple of things about the three main companies that make performance intakes for the E46: AFE Power, K&N and Mishimoto. Of all three companies, it's only AFE Power that label their intake as a cold air intake. Mishimoto and K&N both label theirs as performance intakes. Also, it's only AFE Power that provide performance figures for their intake on their website. They state a maximum 6 horsepower gain. The other companies only state that you'll achieve a horsepower improvement. You can make of that as you will. But based on the research that I've done, I think the 6 horsepower gain is in most cases achievable. The next question I've asked myself is, Why is it that some people get a good improvement by installing a performance intakes and others don't? Why is it the same kit installed on a similar model E46 produces noticeably different results? To look for answers to this question, I found myself looking deeper into the area of thermal dynamics. Now, firstly, I'm not an expert on this subject, but I have done a lot of research, and I think even by having a basic understanding of the principles of thermal dynamics, it will allow us to answer this question. Let's consider the pros and cons of both the standard BMW intake and an aftermarket performance intake. While the standard BMW intake doesn't really promote smooth, free-flowing air into the throttle body, the airbox itself does provide really good protection from the heat in the engine bay. When looking at the performance intake from AFE, its greatest asset is that pod filter and its ability to draw larger volume of air into the throttle body. Its downside is the aluminium heat shield, which is prone to absorbing the heat in the engine bay. So when you consider some of the principles in thermal dynamics and apply these principles to both the pros and cons of both systems, I believe this is where the answer to our question is actually revealed. You see, the problem with performance intakes is not with the kit themselves, but in the driving habits of different E46 owners. By virtue of the performance intake design and its location and where it's drawing air from, it relies heavily on a large volume of fresh, free-flowing air in order for it to produce a horsepower increase. The other principle that thermal dynamics teaches us is that moving air is not colder air. Despite the fact that on a hot summer's day, if you stand in front of a fan, you will automatically feel much colder. It's not that the moving air is actually colder air, it's the fact that the moving air is carrying away the hot air around our bodies. Air is a great insulator. It will hold or trap hot air around an object, such as your air filter. For heat to be removed from the surface of an object, one of 4 processes need to occur: evaporation, convection, radiation, or conduction. For any of this to happen, the air molecules must bump against the hot molecules on the heated surface, so that some of that heat energy can be transferred from the heat molecules to the air molecules. After they have made contact, the air molecules must move away, carrying what used to be surface heat with them. The faster the turnover of the air molecules, the cooler the surface becomes. With this in mind, if you're predominantly doing a lot of city driving where you're rarely getting above, say, 80 kilometers an hour, there is going to be insufficient airflow around your filter to remove those heat molecules and to keep the air around your filter cool. So you're going to get very little benefit from installing a performance intake. On the other hand, if you're consistently doing between 80 and 100 kilometers an hour, the continuous supply of moving air underneath your bonnet will ensure plenty of cooler air around your filter. The result? More horsepower. This I believe to be the answer to the question of why some E46 owners get good results from their performance intakes and others not so much. Looking back to the video produced by the guys at Mighty Car Mods, my opinion is the experiment is flawed because they didn't accurately replicate the airflow of a vehicle moving down the road at, say, 80 kilometers an hour. In the later part of the video, the fan that they used was insufficient to adequately simulate actual driving conditions. So what can we take from all this? As I've said repeatedly in my videos, it's really important that you do an analysis of your build. Ask yourself a lot of questions about what you want from your build and be honest about the use of the vehicle once you've finished your build. Not all mods are going to suit your vehicle. Just because 80% of other E46 owners have done a particular mod, it doesn't hold true that that mod is going to be a good fit for your build. If for the most part you're doing a lot of driving around town, stop-start traffic, dropping the kids off at school, that sort of thing, you're not going to get a good performance increase from a performance intake. I'd suggest that you install this filter here from K&N, which simply replaces the paper element in the standard airbox. If, however, you're a more spirited driver, then installing a performance intake and matching it with a good catback exhaust system, it's going to produce some really fun horsepower increases. So if you're sitting there and you're saying to yourself, no, but I want an actual cold air intake for my E46, well, the reality is you can't buy one, you're going to have to make it yourself. Now fortunately there's a good range of off-the-shelf intake components that you can piece together to put together a cold air intake for your E46. It's going to take some mucking around and it's going to take some trial and error in order to get it to work properly. But if you're prepared to invest the time and energy, then let us know in the comments below how you got on. So, is this going to be my last video on cold air intakes? Probably not. I'm going to keep digging into it, do more research, and hopefully a little further down the track I'm going to be in a position where I can do some real life tests and comparisons on some of the different performance intakes that are available for your E46. Leave me a comment below about what I've discussed in this video. Do you agree or disagree? Let's keep the discussion going so we can get a lot more information out there for E46 owners so that you can make well-informed, well-educated decisions about the mods for your E46 and not simply rely on feedback from a mate of a mate who knew a guy who's got a cousin and he did this. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to smash that like button, and if you'd like to keep up to date with E46 maintenance, performance upgrades, and to follow the build of my supercharged BMW E46 325Ci, how about you subscribe and tickle the bell so you get a notification each time I upload a new video. If you'd like to catch up on my earlier video about intakes, how about you click and watch this video here. You can also watch the video that YouTube recommends for you by clicking and watching this video here. I've enjoyed your company today, thank you very much for watching, but until we meet again, look after yourselves, stay safe, and TTFN.